What work moment made your attitude go from a proud employee to, I'm just here for the paycheck? Story 1. A radio station's word sales. We aggressively advertised the next show, and typically if the attendance totals meet the target we set, I would get a bonus. Typically a sizable bonus. We comfortably exceeded our attendance target by double it, and I was given a $10 Applebee's gift card as a reward. I applied for a new job right after receiving the gift card, which led to my termination. When they questioned my exit, when you reward someone with a $10 Applebee's gift card for hitting a milestone for a concert, you won't retain many people. I made the conscious decision to be upfront. The manager earns $1. I earn $1. That poem was written in a simpler era. Currently, his boss earns $1,000, but I only make $0. He also has workers that are unable to pay their rent. We riot to get it all back when the CEO earns $1 million and we only make jack. Now, Mr. Investor, even if you find this excessive, I must tell you that it is better than guillotine. Story 2. A few weeks ago, this took place. My supervisor instructed me to approach one of the project leaders and request that he halt development on a certain project. I act in that way. The project manager exclaims, "This is absurd! This project costs $400,000. I said, my boss told me to tell you, don't shoot the messenger. So the project manager has a conversation with the operations manager. The operations manager approaches me as my boss enters the room. Did you instruct the project manager to halt work on a certain project? Yes, I did, I respond. Why, according to my boss's instructions? Did you instruct him to inform the project leader to cease work at this job site? The operation manager asks as he turns to face my boss. According to my employer, I didn't. When my supervisor first directed me to do this, there were 3 other individuals in the room. Nobody in the room at that time, including those 3 individuals, said out. Once upon a time, a messenger with such audacity was sent by his employer with a message. The courier tried his best to help till his employer abandoned him, although the project head did complain. Story 3. I oversaw a small network of retail establishments as the general manager. Except for me, all but one of the stores were closed by my employer. Each shop typically had 4 staff, not including a manager. We had to reduce spending since they weren't performing well. So, I got it. Hold on as I managed a whole shop by myself. He never stopped by his one and only shop to check on things, and I was too busy to close for lunch and leave since I was forbidden to do so. Then, virtually every month, he and his wife began taking these 2-week trips. She is unemployed. Once he returned and informed me that he would have to reduce my compensation and that I would have to take over the purchase orders and every Wednesday inventory for the whole business. I ended it there. I obtained a new job and began directing customers to a nearby business that sold comparable goods. His building now has a for sale sign on it. I'm hoping he reads this whole thing. Not a reader. Due to financial constraints, my employer increased the amount of duty placed on my shoulders while reducing my compensation and enjoying lavish vacation. Story 4. Under 7 years, I worked under a manager who appreciated the work that employees produced rather than how it was produced. Motivated and creative workers were commended and often given more responsibilities and tasks. Then the new boss arrived, who was the epitome of a micromanager and managed the department like it was an assembly line from the 1950s. Keep an eye on how long individuals took breaks, when they came and departed, and how long they stayed. Employees were treated like cogs in a machine, and achievements were no longer acknowledged. If there is no motivation to exert any more effort than is necessary, just the bare minimum will be accomplished. Story 5. After the holiday season ended in 1989, I began working at Radio Shack as a seasonal employee. For the first 4 or 5 months, I accepted their offer of a full-time position. I had a terrific time and loved going to work. The manager was then let go, and a new manager took over. We got along all right at first since they had stated that they were moving the shop to a brand new strip mall where we should see a healthy bump in sales. Great. I worked a lot of overtime the week before the transfer to assist set up the new shop, including putting up shelves and organizing items. We relocated that weekend. We were duped by the district manager. He promised to get a large U-Haul vehicle and gather up 15 to 20 people to assist us. We were on our own since he did nothing and attracted no one. I worked non-stop for 36 hours, had a 6-hour nap at home, then returned to work for another 12 hours, setting up and moving everything. I put in a lot of hours and helped out, but the district manager didn't say thank you. He expressed his displeasure that the process took so long. Weak as we were, my boss refused to pay me for all the overtime when I went to turn in my time card. When I insisted on being paid for those hours, he and the district manager attempted to persuade me to volunteer. My hours are messing up the store payroll, they said, and they may have to fire me. I informed them that as long as they paid me for the hours I worked, it was okay with me if they decided to dismiss me for asking for payment. After a few days of argument, they finally decided to pay me. I lost all interest in caring after that. I began to understand that they didn't give a damn about me, and that I was just there to cash a check. Story 6. A former boss instructed me to start transferring a project I had been working on for a year. I informed everyone of this at the last conference call I was supposed to participate in. When I told him it was his choice, I also put him under the bus. Naturally, he said, "That's not what I said." Additionally, I was holding printed emails when he summoned me to a meeting with our director and attempted to place the responsibility for the irate customer on me. It placed a giant bullseye on my back for my boss, and it was the beginning of the end for me there. He had me stay on call around the clock and threatened to fire me if I requested a late shift after being called in at 2 a.m. every single night. Story 7. There were around 30 lawyers working for a small firm. We had a huge case that took up years of firm effort and at some point included almost every attorney at the firm. Without delving into specifics, we triumphed handily. We secured an enormous verdict for our client. And maybe more significantly, we were also compensated for it when the defendant decided against filing an appeal and accepted a settlement in the 8 figures. Since we were largely a military business, our company took the customary 33 cut. Even after taking into consideration the fact that the main attorney and partners would get their customary sizable share and associates would receive tiny percentages, the firm didn't have a documented policy on how to distribute substantial rewards from plaintiff's side cases. Depending on seniority, every colleague at the company was anticipating a high 5-figure or 6-figure bonus from the case. Instead, the top partners were too greedy, which caused them to ruin everyone else. Each partner received $1,500 from them and nothing more. Every single colleague left after 6 months. In all, I estimate that they cheated the associates out of incentives totaling far over $2 million that any moral company would have distributed. The bonus check was soon in reach since the judgment was such a huge victory, but the partners became rapacious. Their strategies were dubious. The associates have now made a decision. Story 8. We had to retain a specific proportion of Borders Rewards purchases while I worked there as a cashier. Because I was skilled at what I did and could persuade others to buy it, I was able to earn a salary in the high 80s. Another person I worked with maintained his by lying. Without saying anything, he would just swipe a card and place it in people's purses. He was eventually discovered and on the verge of being fired when it was decided to put him on probation and have a manager constantly monitor his transactions. After approximately a month, I learned that he has been promoted to work on the floor where all the movies and music are located. After all that, I could not believe they chose to promote him over me, a dedicated worker who performed very well and often received praise from coworkers and bosses. I stopped caring as much after that. I continued to keep my statistics high, but not as high as I once did. A few months later, I was let go from that job because the man who had been filling in for me while I was on vacation was dismissed. I missed too many days due to my own fault. I'm glad that business failed. Story 9. My assistant manager quit to accept a job in her profession while I was still a fairly young manager of a campus bookstore. The start of the textbook rush was still 2 months away. Given that I will be shorthanded, my regional inquired what he could do to assist me get by. When things become hectic, send me an experienced employee from another business for only 1 week. He phoned me back the next day and said, "I can't get you anybody. You won't be permitted to employ replacements. Your 3 temporary employees must be fired the day after rush hour, and none of them may be made part-time. However, that effectively implies that I will be the sole employee. It's a little shop. Take care of it." Story 10. Former employment. Due to difficult circumstances, the company's owner fired a secretary. Though sad, it makes sense. Then he dismisses her spouse, who was a member of the cleaning crew's night shift. I didn't want any reprisal, so I said, At the height of the recession, he removed both of this family's sources of income for no other reason than paranoia. "We are family here," the owner would remark. Sure. Story 11. Even though it was a 3-day weekend, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, I had previously committed to working on those days. I received a call from work on Saturday. They need my telephone assistance for a task that did not call for me to return inside. I took care of it at home. It took around 30 minutes. My time card for the job I did on Saturday was extended by 30 minutes. My only day off, you know. My employer also informs me on Tuesday, after his 3-day weekend, that this Saturday's overtime of 30 minutes was not allowed since I didn't show there. So I just stopped responding. When I used my mobile phone after work, my employer paid. Story 12 makes me angry. There is no specific time to arrive or leave for work, but the usual guideline is for 10-hour shifts. My employer has repeatedly reminded me. I've been having some of the worst sleep of my life from Monday through Thursday. Things are improving. On it, I'm working. I've been arriving between 7:30 and 8:00 a.m., which is around 30 to 45 minutes later than most folks. I'm not missing anything since everyone just sends emails for the first hour. I never arrive late if I have an early appointment. I don't mind remaining later than everyone else to do my assignment. I consistently complete all of my work ahead of schedule, and I never turn down new job. How does my employer operate? Berate me for entering. When I do, please inform me that even if the time clock indicates that I've been clocked in, I cannot build that time if my machine is still loading up, for example. The phrase penny wise and pound foolish is defined as follows. I recognized how little he regarded me since I didn't match his exact idea of what a worker should be, and I went from being really ambitious to putting up the bare minimum effort. Even though I consistently provide great work and complete all of my tasks. There was a manager who was oh so severe and whose policies really irritated his employees. She would arrive at 8, but he would stress and chastise her until she had royally licked her work ethic. Story 13. My department store supervisor wanted me to persuade customers to purchase items they didn't need. An elderly man who was having trouble disconnecting from the internet came through. I am aware that my networks determined from his information that the Ethernet connection between his gateway and wireless application was at issue. Sold him an affordable cable box. It seems to me that I ought to have also attempted to sell him a new router. You disgusting crypt. The guy was a senior. A few days later, I resigned. Ignore it. I won't sell things that people don't need by lying to them. Story 14. When I requested a large butt fan to be placed in our work area to assist circulate the air since we were working in a 120-degree environment without anything to move the air around, I was informed that it wasn't in the budget to buy another fan. 2 weeks later, I discovered that not only had no one requested the fan, but that it was also 120 degrees while the fan was sitting in storage. Accumulating dust? Do you work somewhere? One does not just clock into more doors either. Story 15. The time the new person was promoted, who depends on me to accomplish his job? Never be so excellent at your work that losing you would be detrimental to the organization. Story 16. Due to the extreme busyness, she worked a 12-hour shift and then remained an additional hour. Management instructed him to be a man and stay another hour, but he didn't get a thank you. Story 17. New boss is the 17th story. Instead of working for two people with a vision or any care for the motivation or morale of their employees, we went from someone uplifting and motivating. Story 18. The owners and general manager complained about my absence due to cancer surgery when I had been out for less than 2 weeks and returned after 2 weeks wearing a freaking diaper out of fear that I would lose my job as a result of my prostate cancer. They then anticipated that I would be interested in whether they made a profit. That's probable, I agree. Story 19. When my colleague and I requested a little raise, we were informed that we already get excessive pay. Currently, we get the minimum wage. Story 20, right after we had a talk about how amazing my work has been, and we had discussed a raise in my hourly pay. Due to the increased work, they recruited an outside person and paid him as much as I get to complete all the social media work I've been doing. It goes without saying that I stopped using social media, and they still don't understand why it's crap now. Story 21. Both of my mentors, two women who helped me turn my life around and recognized promise in me that I did not, were dismissed, packaged out within a week of each other, fired by persons who had just joined and who subsequently left the company themselves. Story 22. Scowled at me and said, "Should I call your mother and tell her you can't do your job?" I was unpaid and no one had bothered to train me. I packed my bags and walked out. Never returned. Story 23. After 7 years of service, going above and above my responsibilities and remuneration, and putting in countless hours of voluntary work without making a claim for them. Since my grandfather lived 4 hours away, I requested 2 days off, but they only offered me one. In order to get home in time for work the next day, I had to leave my grandpa's funeral during the ceremony. Story 24. The business eliminated an entire department and gave their responsibilities to mine. The rigorous no overtime regulation is still in place, and we are now required to do the tasks of 2 employees for a 52-cent rise. 3 months later, the corporation arranges for over 3,000 managers to be flown to Florida for a conference at which they rent out an amusement park and host a famous musician. I'm now the saltiest salty employee, needless to say. Story 25. I always arrived on time or early, worked until the end of my shift or remained longer if necessary. When it's hectic, pick up the pace. Then I began to observe that no one seemed to object when everyone else constantly arrives more than 10 minutes late. They often depart 5 or 10 minutes early and maintain a sluggish pace the whole day. The firm offers no opportunities for advancement. Every year, everyone receives the same wage increase, and no excellent behavior is recognized.